I know all three of you are in paradise right now. You're on La Isla. I am so
Yeah.
jealous of you three. But as we were starting to record, you had mentioned that the internet connection isn't the best on La Isla. So,
Yeah.
people listening, we gotta give our friends on the podcast today some grace because you think Comcast is bad here in Chicago, like. It's a struggle and it's a challenge. Puerto Rico doesn't necessarily have all the resources that we do on the mainland in the States. So it's another example of just the disparity that exists between that relationship. I don't want to get too political here, but I do want to talk about the parallels between maybe some storylines in the Star Wars universe and the reality Puerto Rico faces. But before I get ahead of myself, I do want to back up a little bit. I mentioned you three are all in Puerto Rico. Y'all three met on La Isla, or did you how did you all three meet?
Mo and I, we went to high school together,
Uh-huh.
and then Nani's husband, husbando, as we like to call him on the show, he went to elementary school with me. But I didn't meet Nani through her husband. I met her through my other best friend, whom also went to high school with us.
Break it down for
And
us. So your podcast comes out weekly, right?
Yes.
yes,
We were doing bi-weekly during
Uh-huh.
Mando because we were doing a review section of Mandalorian that we released on Mondays. But usually our regular schedules are on Wednesdays.
I feel like there is so much positivity in the universe. And yet, yeah, you see like online conversations and people just go so hard if they don't like something. And I understand like if it's a beloved franchise and you care so deeply about it. But like I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is a hot take, but like The Last Jedi, I really like that. I really like that movie. If y'all disagreed, that's totally fine. Totally fine.
oh no,
We are huge fans.
huge fans.
Huge fans.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
It's just weird that I feel like depending on who you ask, it almost feels like a 50-50 split if people like that. But I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
let's do things that aren't in the same mold of previous trilogies. Like let's start thinking outside the box, bringing in other characters from, other like corners of the universe, or even just like focusing on the imperfections of humanity. Like I loved seeing Luke Skywalker just like this old man on this island, kind of like get off my lawn, type of thing.
Yep.
But like there's other people that just despise that movie.
Yeah.
I
And
don't-
they were very loud about it too.
yeah. And
That's
then-
the problem. I think. I mean, obviously, I don't have the scientific numbers
Yeah.
to back this up, but I am absolutely convinced that it's a very vocal minority. Because when we went to Star Wars Celebration in Chicago, Mo and I went there. Now he sadly couldn't come with us. Hopefully, she'll join us in Anaheim. But the positivity that was in that convention hall, and we were talking about thousands of people. And this was right after that, right after Last Jedi, it was like overwhelming. Like you couldn't really see that negativity, that alleged negativity, right, that movie produced. And it kind of ties into what you were saying, that some people just feed off of that negativity and just, instead of taking the positives and ignoring the negative, not ignoring, but, not being so adamant on spreading toxicity through that negativity. It's it's very complicated,
do y'all ever
discourse.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a tightrope. It feels like sometimes. I did want to ask y'all, in your knowledge of the Star Wars universe, besides Boricuas like Rosario Dawson, Jimmy Smits, are you aware of any other Puerto Ricans that have played Star Wars characters in the movies and the TV shows? Because those are the only two I can think of right now.
Well, Last Jedi had Benicio del Toro. He was a limited appearance, but still substantial in
Se
terms
te olvidó
of quality.
Yeah,
Uh,
totally forgot.
in Mandalorian, we actually had in Mandalorian we had Ismael Cruz Cordova. He's also Puerto Rican. He was Kin or Quinn. I don't know I forgot how to pronounce the name. He was from the first season, one of the purple Twi'leks from the Prisoner episode. In the Clone Wars, we had Elizabeth Rodriguez, who was one of the sisters in season 7. And now in the upcoming Cassian Andor show, we're going to have Adria Arjona. She's half Puerto Rican and half Guatemalan. She's Ricardo Arjona's daughter. Well, Lin-Manuel did a cameo in Rise of Skywalker as Blink and You'll Miss It cameo. And then Freddie Prinze Jr. He was Kanan Jarrus in Rebels.
You're killing it right now, Gustavo. Like this is like five more than I thought existed. Okay, keep going. Sorry. This is great.
I think that's it for Puerto Ricans.
Chacho, that was impressive. That was impressive. I totally forgot about Lynn. I forgot about Freddie. I mean, I didn't even hear about Ismael. Like, this is like fantastic. I'm gonna listen back and look all these people up now. I legit thought it was like I forgot about Del Toro. My God, that is a lot of Puerto Ricans. Again, I just thought it was 2.
Yes,
I thought we were not represented. I mean, comparatively, we're not really represented equally, but
we're doing better than
most
other minorities. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a great segue. Looking back at the original trilogy, looking back at the prequel trilogies, I think one thing most people I would hope could agree on is that there's a serious lack in diversity. And it is very much trends to a majority, if not fully, all-white cast. And that's not even touching on the people behind the camera that do all the movie magic behind the scenes. So we're seeing more black characters, more Asian characters, more Latina characters. Just curious on what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts on the state of representation or the lack thereof in the Star Wars franchise?
Yes, I think the conversation is twofold. It's one, the in-screen representation of real world minorities in the films and TV shows, but there's also how you code certain things in the show. For example, like alien species and whatnot, because obviously alien species are stand-ins for real world groups of people and cultures, and how those types of people are represented also reflect the representation of minorities in some abstract way. So in that department, Mandalorian has been kind of in a roller coaster, because it's done really good job at it and then terrible job at it. What are you gonna say, Mo?
I was going to say along the lines of that Star Wars opens up the idea of diversity. And space, there are actually different species, different races, and to feel identified from that perspective, like, to me, like, at least from the original trilogy, like, I couldn't identify with any of the white people there. I just identify with Chewbacca, which is like this tall alien that's all hairy. Like, you can't even see because it's what I think that's the beauty of having that diversity and making sure that it's not only of like just showing a face. Oh, you just have a diversity quota. It's about giving them that backstory, giving them the actual potential to build up their characters, just as the comparative white actors get in their own roles. And when it comes to animation, it's even better. Like, you've seen actually in Star Wars, like, more actors that are diverse, especially in Rebels. You have a lot, like, the main cast they're all diverse, and Resistance and other animated series. I think the main cast, they're all diverse. There's a lot of Latinas, there's Asians. So we actually benefit from diversity, and that's what should be fomented. But it lacked. It's still it's up and down, like Goose says. At times they make a good effort to make sure that whoever is diverse, they're having that backstory, but then they're just used as a plot device because they need the bad guy. But it is what. So let's see how it evolves.
Mariana, what about you?
Yeah, well, I mean, for the original trilogy, which is probably the worst one at showing diversity, I didn't really notice it at the time, because when I first saw them, I was a kid. And then even as I grew up, I kind of just was already in love with them. So I didn't see it as much as I should have probably. And then that kind of extended to all of Star Wars. So I think I'm way more open-minded about it than a lot of people. But I think that they have been trying to make an effort at getting it better. Sometimes they get it right, sometimes they fail. Like you said, they in a couple episodes of Mandalorian, they did an excellent job, and then in other ones, they kind of dropped the ball completely or forgot that they were trying to do this. I think that the animated series, The Clone Wars, was really good at it, and especially in that part that Goose said about the actual alien species as well, because you actually get treatments of like their specific planets and how their liberties are treated, and all these kind of like political themes that go around like these races, which could symbolize minorities. So I think the animated series is probably the one that succeeds the most at showing diversity, but we'll see what happens now with all the new content that's getting thrown out. I mean,
Likewise, like y'all, I'm looking forward to seeing what comes. I was really happy to see some of the changes they were making in Mandalorian, even as Mando was growing out his team, like it was looking like a pretty diverse squad. But hopefully, it's not the end, and we get a little snowball effect here, and we get more representation. And more Boricuas too. Comparing Star Wars and the real world right now, do you see any parallels in any of the relationships in Star Wars or any of the storylines in the Star Wars universe that you can compare to the experience of Puerto Rico? Of course, I think an obvious one is, well, for me, I'm a little biased, but the evil empire versus the rebellion or the resistance. But are there any parallels that you see in the Star Wars universe to what Puerto Rico is experiencing today or has experienced?
You have a government, you start with federation or like a group of a democracy that eventually has different planets. They're different like colonies, and Puerto Rico's status with the U.S. it's very complicated. Can be described as that colonial aspect. Even though we're considered citizens, do we get the same benefits? And this aliens from different galaxies were like, well, just because we're from the same part of the same government, but you're in the outer skirts, you are in the outer rims, you're not important, so you don't get the same treatment, even though we still consider you part of the same whole concept. So you can draw a bunch of parallels from Star Wars into the U.S. Puerto Rico relationships.
Yeah, we were in Naboo in episode 1, and the United States is the Trade Federation, blockade. You said it.
You just said it.
The Jones Act. The Jones Act right there.
Exactly.
Jones Act.
Yeah. You got. You just meant that. There's your parallel right there. Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying, Mo. I think you're right. I think there are a lot of parallels there. I think looking at something like the expansion of the empire, thinking we know what's right, you don't. Here's what we're gonna do. But then you see this wealth disparity. You see the equity disparity, social services. It's just very tyrannical. Very much like, we're going to make the decisions and you're going to like it, whether you agree with it or not.
I actually really liked what Mo said, that we are really comparable to like if we would be in the outer rim, just kind of like,
Yeah. Just kind of out there.
Yeah, just kind of out there and, deal. And if something bad happens, Trump will come down and throw toilet paper at us,
Yes.
Awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of parallels. I start to think of like that prequel trilogy where you had a lot of, it was very reflective of the Bush administration at that time, where it was a lot of leaning into like fear mongering, and we need to like not be as trusting of those around us, and we have to make sure that we're maintaining control, and what's the best way to kind of consolidate power. That way we can exercise it more forcefully. And looking at even like something like the recent Puerto Rico elections, like a lot of times I feel like there is a lot of fear mongering and what could be if Puerto Rico is not in a relationship with the United States. And even looking like at a political party like the PNP, where it's like, oh my gosh, if we're not states or don't have a connection to the United States, like you're saying, die. In the outer rim, La Isla is just going to float into the ocean and never be seen again. Watch out. So
Don't get me
now,
started. Oh.
yeah. So now seeing, right? So now seeing, thinking of like the rebellion and the resistance and how people then start coming together and you start to see coalition building. Looking at this last election in Puerto Rico, where you had other political parties popping up and like getting
Yeah.
double-digit percentage of the votes, like just
Yeah.
looking at the shifting patterns of what people are looking at as the best path forward for Puerto Rico is really interesting, and actually like coalescing around different figures. I also when I think about the parallels, I also start to think about how what is it in the Star Wars universe that you had the evil empire, then you had the rebellion wins, we're off to a new era of government, and then somehow within the decade or two they're almost back in the same situation with the First Order, and now you have the Resistance. So, and then I start thinking, well, here in the United States, we had the situation where we had Bush, then we went to Obama. Everybody thought we had Obama. This is great. We're like on to a new chapter of leadership. Then we get something like Promesa. Okay, now we're in the same spot that we're in now. Now we're in like resistance mode. And then you have someone like Donald Trump that comes in, and now we don't have any financial aid. So I start to think of like, okay, what in the Star Wars universe, what happened with the level of trust and organization and coalition building that led to the recent trilogy, where now we're kind of in that same pattern of our backs are against the wall, we're fighting back against oppression. Looking at the relationship between the United States and Puerto Rico, that involves a lot of trust, and sometimes the players that are in the room where it happens don't have the best interests of the people in mind. So I start thinking, okay, where was the trust broken down in this relationship to a point where it feels like when you're taking 2 steps forward, you're taking 1 step back. And what does that mean for the future of La Isla? What does that mean for the future of the Resistance in Star Wars? Do they have to rethink what their relationship is between one another and how they exist in the universe, and what's the best path forward for the people they represent? Is it time for Puerto Rico to reassess what that relationship to the United States really means? And it's time to coalition build on La Isla for true self-determination of its people?
I was actually watching, because I haven't actually finished watching the entire Clone Wars. I only started watching the Clone Wars animated because of the podcast. So, and my husband is like a huge fan of the Clone Wars, so we watch it together.
Yeah.
And then because we love talking about it, we'll pause like in the middle of episodes and just have this like inner discussion between ourselves. And one of the things we were talking about recently, because we were at the Mandalore, I'm not going to spoil things, but we were thinking about how after they finally defeat the Empire, and then they just go back to a new republic again, and that system had already failed massively. Like the republic failed. It's the corruption that was in it was the reason this Palpatine was able to rise to power. And then after finally defeating the Empire, they decide to go back to the same model of government that had already failed. Like, did nobody there say like, I have a new idea for like a new form of government, like, or who knows, what went into the decision to just go back to a republic? Right. But it's kind of insane. You knew it already didn't work, so why are you trying to do the same thing over and over and expecting a new result?
Which is the story of the Puerto Ricans.
Yeah.
Last 50 years, yeah.
We went from one empire to another empire. And I think you hit a really good point. Like, just as each planet has to reassess their relationship, because why are they part of the system? Was it because of mutual interest, or was it because of the empires or the republic's interest in that place? Is it our relationship is solely based on the U.S.'s strategic interest in Puerto Rico? Like, that's the history of it. There's no denying that. There are legal cases from the Supreme Court pretty much saying we're just possessions of the states. We're not even like legitimately thing. And then how can you go from that? how do you build that trust when there was no trust in the beginning? So that I think it's just something that Star Wars and the Clone Wars explores in certain aspects, especially with like the planets that are like, well, should I join the Separatists or should I join the Republic, or should I just stay
Remain neutral. Mm-hmm.
Because there's so much going on. There's and they're all, just as they're all morally, they can all be morally correct, they can all be morally corrupt. And that's what Star Wars kind of shows, that you have, even though whichever side you choose, you have to actually give it some thought, go in with the compassion instead of the dark side, kind of like that.
Did y'all have any thoughts on the statehood referendum? How did y'all feel about that? I know that's a big question.
I mean, I obviously couldn't vote in it since I live in Chicago, but it's a sham. It's structured. It was structured to have the result it did, and it was also a waste of taxpayer money, because as long as there's no resolution in Congress that binds them to the results of self-determination. I mean, how many of these referendums have we had? It's a waste of time.
In the past few years? Yeah, and every time.
I think it's like four or five.
Yeah, and every time they do it, it's a lot of money that they spend for something that the decision doesn't really matter until, Congress decides anything. So I think it's ridiculous that they keep doing them, honestly.
It's just BS political charades.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's not a coincidence that they always happen on election time, because it's that fear mongering you were mentioning before. It's like, oh, well, see, if you don't choose statehood and you don't choose us, the island's gonna be destroyed. But like, frankly, every time I come back here, things
look worse.
Political parties aren't improving things. So
it hits like, it always boggles me why political parties were based on the status. It's not even based on, a spectrum of what you believe, like you're leading left on certain things or policies. Like how can you even make right decisions when in your own party you have the whole like spectrum of like,
ideology.
My policy, it's like left or right, but I have to be in this party because I believe in a certain X or Y status. Then it has never made any sense.
Yeah,
I think that was a big positive from this election. That I took a big takeaway from, is that at least the minority parties like Lugaro and Dalmau, even though they're both pro-independence people, their rhetoric wasn't
about the status only.
Talking about status. It was they tried to focus on the policy, which I thought was a breath of fresh air, like Mo was mentioning, because it's always like that fear mongering of like, the statehood or independence. And it's always an interesting thing, at least personally with me, with this statehood people fear mongering with independence. Like, if you choose the Independence Party, we're going to be a banana republic. But it's like, how many decades have we been choosing? How many decades have we been choosing the statehood party? We're still not a state. And we're looking worse than some actual banana republics. Again,
a common theme I think here in our conversation is just we're hoping for a new hope for Puerto Rico. That's what we need. I mean, if people want to learn more about your podcast, your T-shirt, I know you have like a merch store, right? You have like a couple shirts up right now.
Yeah.
How do people find this Husbando shirt, and how do people keep up with your podcast?
At least for the merch, we try to be pretty neutral with the merch, so we don't have many stuff like with the logos on it. So like, if you like our designs but don't like our podcast necessarily, you can still find some stuff there. And if you do like the podcast, there's some stuff with our logos. But our merch is on TeePublic. So you just go to teepublic.com and then keyword search Triad of the Force. You'll find us and see all the stuff we have there. We have I don't know, I think around 30 something designs, and we just keep adding more as we get inspired.
That's great, y'all. I remember when we follow each other on Twitter, and I remember y'all opened that merch store, and I just saw the 2 designs. So you have 30 now. That's fantastic.
Some of the ones that we try to like keep putting out are translated things from the Star Wars universe. So like the shirt Mo's wearing, for example, instead of like saying the traditional t-shirts that might just say a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, we just have the hace mucho tiempo, una galaxia muy, muy lejana. We're gonna add a couple of Spanglish versions there for like all the our since a lot of Puerto Ricans we speak in Spanglish, so we're gonna have those versions up soon. But it's like focusing on that representation aspect, and have actors or producers, directors that are Latin American, and showcase them there.
Yeah, no, I love the shirt Mo's wearing. People listening can't really see it, but it's a good excuse to go on TeePublic and check it out. Right up my alley. I love the creativity. We are at the end of the show. You've been so generous with your time. How can people keep up with each of you? How can they keep up with the podcast? Give us all the things.
You can find us on Twitter at Triad of the Force. We are also on YouTube. We do not yet have enough subscribers to have our own personalized link, but once we hit 100, we'll be able to get that. So please like and subscribe our videos. But you can find us obviously on YouTube, Triad of the Force. We just opened an Instagram that has no content in it. Also at Triad of the Force, if you want to just follow, and eventually there might be one or two images there. But yeah, those are the locations of our podcast. And obviously our podcast is in all major platforms: Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, etc. If you can't find it, just let us know. We'll see what's up.
Right on. Okay, Mo, Gustavo Acosta, Mariana Martinez, the hosts of Triad of the Force. It's a podcast about Star Wars and other whimsies. Really appreciate you three being on. Thank you for being with me today.
No worries.
Thank you for
having us. May the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you and also with you.